Today I want to continue talking about attitudes and values toward democracy. I want to take an empirical approach and really look at the public opinion survey data from diverse parts of the world. Really, by the time I'm done today, I think every part of the world and every major part of the world. And first of all, see where things are heading in terms of trends in attitudes and values toward democracy. And second of all, see what light the evidence we have can shed on some critical questions. One question is there anything to the Asian values thesis? That Asians have different values than people in the West, and either they don't value democracy at all, the way we presume that people in the West predominantly do, or that they maybe value democracy in general, but not kind of the deep liberal architecture of protection for individual freedoms and constraint on the power of the executives that forms an important kind of foundation for liberal democracy. And then we can ask the same questions of the Middle East, because there's a section on the syllabus if you want to delve into it. I don't expect everybody to read every part of the reading for this week, but you can focus on kind of what area of the world most interests you. And here again, I'll give you an example of a kind of stylized view of how people in the Muslim world feel about political authority. And that has shaped a lot of views that trying to pursue or support or encourage democratic development in the Muslim world in general and the Arab world in particular is a fool's errand. This is not the way they look at authority. They're not like us. So that's one question. How universal is democracy? A second question is, of course, what are the trends in terms of how people are evaluating the democracies they're living in, and whether we can see signs of consolidation or deconsolidation, if you want to look at it that way, in places like Korea and Taiwan, in several Latin American democracies, and in Western Europe and the United States. And then the third question is, where does this come from? What drives, shapes, causes support for democracy or attitudes and values toward democracy? Are there any independent variables we can identify that seem to shape these attitudes? So I hope to do that all in the space of this lecture. Let me pick up where I left off very quickly by just giving you some concluding evidence that can apply to Asia and constitute another kind of way of testing or examining the validity of the Asian values thesis. We do a lot of things in the Asian barometer. Keep in mind, we don't want to rely on a single indicator. So we want, for methodological rigor and reliability of the evidence, the robustness of the evidence, to be able to come at this in multiple ways, ask questions in different forms, and see if we get any kind of consistent pattern. So another way of doing this, which we have settled on more recently, is to give respondents in Asia pairs of statements and say, which one do you agree with more? That government is our employee, the people should tell government what needs to be done, or the government is like a parent and it should decide what's good for us. That the media should have the right to publish news and ideas without censorship, or that the government should have the right to prevent the media from publishing dangerous, destabilizing material. That political leaders should be chosen by the people through open and competitive elections, or political leaders should be chosen on the basis of their virtue and capability. And of course, in each case, the second statement is the one that would accord with the classic stylized portrait of Asian values: fear of disorder, too much competition, the need for strong hierarchical authority. And again, from the latest round of the Asian Barometer, round 4, here's the evidence. The percentage of people who choose the first option, not the Asian values option, the statement that government is our employee, we the people should tell government what to do, varies. You make your judgment about how societies come out here. Surprisingly low in Korea, where otherwise Korea is pretty liberal in its views. But, you know, this could be a legacy of authoritarian rule, still some cultural deference, maybe a glitch in the translation. I don't have all the explanations here. Taiwan and Thailand turn out to be pretty liberal on this measure, Japan as well. But this is the thing that I think is most interesting. This is the result from the People's Republic of China around 2015, when more than half of the public are choosing the first statement, government is our employee, and not the second. Should government control and censor the media? Well, the Chinese are more, society are more permissive in giving the government scope to do that. Indonesia even more so. But here again, you see the pattern I was suggesting, that the advanced industrial democracies tend to be more liberal. Thailand, of course, has made a lot of progress in social and economic development. It's been coming up. Singapore, too, is surprisingly liberal on this measure in terms of not being a big fan, the Singaporean public, of censorship. And of course, there's such a fierce tradition of freedom of the press in the Philippines that there they score very high on this measure. And then political leaders chosen through competitive elections, not on the basis of their virtue and capability. I mean, this is the result that floored me. It floored me so much that I had to go back and look at the data a second time to make sure I wasn't getting it wrong. It's very high in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. But you know what? 81%, about the same percentage of the public in the, not Taiwan, the People's Republic of China, a representative random sample survey, are saying the same thing. Now, what do they mean here? Do they have in mind competitive village elections within the framework of the Chinese Communist Party? Many may have exactly that in mind. So it again could have a different context in China, but still they're not choosing the Asian values option of kind of Confucian preference for a meritocracy over some kind of public input into the selection of leaders. Okay, now if we look at Burma, we see here, you know, a portrait that I was trying to suggest about a kind of dualistic attitude toward democracy among some of the lower income Asian countries. 72% of the citizens of Myanmar, I use them interchangeably, the names of the country, think democracy is always preferable. Again, we've been through that item. It's a very high percentage. But 72% do not support the principles of horizontal accountability on average across those different measures. Should the legislature check the executive? Should the judiciary? Most people say no. 62% adhere to, you know, when you look at the kind of value indicators of authoritarianism versus democracy, without using the D word, but just how they operationalize it. 83% support a role for religious leaders in lawmaking. Now, in most cases, they're talking about leaders of the Buddhist clergy, not Muslims. And 81% support a link between religion and citizenship. And of course, that's not a good thing for the Rohingya religious minority in Burma or the Muslim minority more generally. And I've just tried to give you an anchor with another Southeast Asian democracy that is, again, at a kind of middling level of development, is not highly developed, but has been a democracy now for about 20 years. And so, you know, there's certainly reason to expect that as Burma develops economically, maybe with higher levels of education and so on, that's the modernization thesis, it will move in the direction of gradually increasing, you know, orientation toward underlying democratic values. There's some reason to expect that if Burma could have more experience with democracy over a long period of time, maybe that might induce value change. We'll come back to these theories at the end. but this is the portrait today. And it's why the military leaders of Burma, who actually dominate the political system, are thinking to themselves, you know, they may not have seen this public opinion survey data, although I don't even rule that out, but they're certainly thinking to themselves, okay, we've got a populist tool here to undermine the National League for Democracy and civilian democratic forces by playing the card of religion, cultural solidarity, nativist fears, and so on, and they've been doing it to the hilt. Okay, any questions about this before we move on?